right up here.
Hi. So, Dirt Gently is one of the craziest shows I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thanks.
So I just have to know, what is your favourite moment of filming from Dirt Gently?
Whoa, favorite moment of filming. The thing about Dirt is there's no scene that was just standard. There's no scene that we shot that was just a normal dialogue scene between two characters, or like there was nothing that had any kind of sense of normalcy or it just being a sort of standard scene. Everything was strange and heightened and weird and other. So everything that we shot was hilarious and ridiculous and absurd in the best way. I don't know if I have a favorite or anything that stands out. I mean, you know, the first season, sort of a big first scene kind of like moment for both Sam and I, Sam Dirt Gently in the show, was this sort of like back and forth ridiculous scene talking about how like the nature of this corgi dog and how the dog might, and it was so ludicrous. It was like 2 or 3 pages long of this back and forth argument, and it was sort of the moment that we were like, okay, this is sort of the tone of the show, and it was sort of a great jumping off point. But man, we had so much fun. Like I said, every single day was something kind of absurd and strange and hilarious and wonderful. You know, it was really sad that we couldn't carry on. I mean, Max had a really good idea for the 3rd season, and we were all really hyped to continue working together because it had really become a family over the course of those 2 years. So it was a shame that we couldn't carry on because it was so fun. And every season was a different genre. It was almost like an anthology, but all the same characters. So every season was going to be there in a completely different show in a way. Yeah, it's fun.
Got a question all the way up here on the left.
Hi.
Hi, Elijah. First of all, I'm a huge fan. I've got a question about the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring.
Okay.
The opening narration by Galadriel, aka Kate Blanchett.
Yes.
I heard there were alternate narrations recorded by you and Ian McKellen before they settled on Kate Blanchett.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if this is true or not, because I just heard it on IMDb.
It is true, and man, that is in like the far recesses of my brain because I hadn't remembered that. But you're absolutely right. We had done, I think the first recording was of Ian actually, so it was going to be Gandalf initially, and then they tried it with me, but they weren't sort of sure. I think there was a sort of a process of kind of finding that and figuring out who was the best voice, and ultimately the sort of the character that made the most sense in articulating ultimately the history of Middle-earth that led up to the creation of the Wings and that prologue backstory. Of course, Galadriel's the one that makes the most sense, ultimately. And they went with Kate. Always go with Kate. That should be a mandate for everything. I know, she's incredible.
We've got a question all the way up here on the right.
Who is the best person you've ever filmed with?
The best person? Oh, fuck, man. That's so broad. Okay.
Actor.
Right, I figured. Right, the best actor. That's a difficult. I've been so fortunate to work with some incredible people. Viggo's one of my favorites. You know, Viggo was, the story of him being cast in Lord of the Rings is such an incredible one because they had hired someone else to be Aragorn, and it didn't work out. But we had spent 2 months with the other actor preparing, and that actor also had 2 months of horse training and sword fighting and preparing for the role. And the decision was made the day that we started principal photography, and they had to bring in someone very quick. And so they had this idea about Viggo, and they cast him very quickly. It must have been a whirlwind for him, because he agreed to do it, and then he came to New Zealand and had all of this catching up to do. I think 2 weeks later he shot, which is remarkable, having had, we all had 2 months of prep and getting to know each other and understanding the journey that we were on and understanding our characters, all of this work. And just sort of feeling like we were already at home in New Zealand with this crew. And he had to do that in the course of 2 weeks. And the degree that he sort of jumped into that task and took ownership over it, and also became such an inspiration to all of us in a way that was true of Aragorn to all of the characters, was just unbelievable. Like truly one of the, my favorite people, and he was a real beacon for everybody on that film, both from the cast and from the crew. He was amazing.
Okay, a question here on the left.
Hi, I'm Evie.
Hi.
I've got a question about Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
What is your favourite creature in all 3 movies?
Ooh. I mean, probably the Balrog. A creature? I mean, someone said Gollum. Yes, Gollum. Gollum, I don't see Gollum as a creature, really. I see Gollum as a sort of sad, tragic hobbit that's been mutated because of the evil of the ring. But as far as the creature design in the film, my God, there's some incredible ones. I mean, the cave troll, too. But the Balrog is awesome. So rad. I mean, think about, like, I don't often think about this, but, we started making those movies 20 years ago. And the technology has obviously gotten exponentially better over the years from a computer animation standpoint. But if you look back at Lord of the Rings, it still really holds up, which is remarkable. It doesn't really feel dated at all. They were really pushing the bounds of what one could do with computer animation within the context of a live-action movie, where the blending of the two felt really realistic. But it still really holds up.
There's a question all the way up on the right. Hiya.
Hi.
Hi Elijah, we've heard a lot of horror stories over the past couple of years about child actors in Hollywood. What's your secret to survival, I guess, and longevity, really, in Hollywood?
I mean, I ultimately first have to credit my mother. I was, I was raised in a very, quote-unquote, normal setting, in the sense that I had a very normal home life outside of the work that I was doing as an actor. And my mom was obsessed with sort of drilling into me the notion of humility and not accepting special treatment, and to not allow myself to have an inflated sense of ego or self as a result of, being an actor. That I was no more important than anyone else. And this was like drilled into me from a young age. So it provided me with a pretty strong foundation of reality, and allowing myself to, I loved what I did as an actor, but I saw it as a job, and kind of kept it in its rightful place. So as I became more recognizable, there was two things. One, I never became super famous overnight as a kid, which I'm super fucking grateful for, because I think that's hard. Anybody having to grapple with going from 0 to famous overnight, it's a lot of pressure, and there's not really any tools. I mean, there are, but they don't sort of hand you a guidebook on how to deal with that. And I was lucky enough to have this sort of gradual recognizability slowly over time, to where, when Lord of the Rings happened, certainly I wasn't as recognizable as anything compared to what Lord of the Rings became, but I at least had a sense of being recognized and understanding how to compartmentalize those things. So that when Lord of the Rings came out, I'd see, myself on the side of a building, but I was able to kind of compartmentalize and contextualize that as oh, that's Frodo, that's what that is. All of that is to say, I credit my mom with that greatly. And then as far as, making a transition from being a child actor to continue to work, some of that's luck too. It's not, there's no grand design. I didn't have any kind of strategy. There was no strategy. a lot of my career, certainly as an adult, has been reactive, you know? Just sort of following my heart and my gut and allowing that to, you know, guide me ultimately. And I think that those instincts just grow over time too. So a little bit of luck, great parenting, an amazing family, you know, good friends in a sense of normalcy, and a relatively healthy perspective about this ridiculous industry and that I love, you know. I'm still working as an actor. I get to do this. I get to make movies still, and I'll never not be in love with it, you know.
Got a question right here in the middle, right here.
Hello. So it's occasionally been said that identified online that you and Daniel Radcliffe have looked the same.
Yeah, I've heard it before.
What's the most awkward interaction you've had with a fan where someone's like confused you with someone else? It may be Daniel, it may be someone else, but like, what's your most awkward memory of that?
My favorite is I was on an elevator with one other person, and you know how that can be awkward anyway, especially before cell phones. Do you remember that? When you didn't have a fucking thing to look at? It was just you and another person, you know, filling space but not talking. So it was one of those, and I was standing in this elevator, and I could just see out of the corner of my eye that this person was staring at me and working up the courage to say something. I could just sense it. I worked floor after floor after floor. It was like going from the 10th floor to the lobby, just slowly, ding, ding. I could just feel him like, and right before the elevator doors opened at the lobby, he just said, "Harry Potter." I said, "No." That was very satisfying.
Got a question all the way up at the top on the right.
Hello. One of my guilty pleasures whilst watching Lord of the Rings would have to be the bloopers. You know, the little mistakes. What's one of your favourites?
Of the bloopers. I actually don't remember what we ended up putting on the blooper reel. I don't know. I haven't watched that blooper reel in so long, so I don't even remember what's on there. I do remember, I don't even know if it made it to the blooper reel, because I don't think the sound was recording, or if it did, it didn't capture this. But on the first day of filming, we're running away from, we're Sam and Frodo getting knocked down the hill on the wooded road, and we go tumbling with Merry and Pippin, and we're tumbling down the hill. We all land on top of each other, and I landed, the second take, I think I landed with a pressure fart. So it was a pile on top of me, and it was just the last bit, and then I farted, and it was really funny. I don't know if it ended up in the blooper reel though. It's good. Yeah, that does deserve an applause. That's true. My flatulence.
Question right here on the left.
Hi, my husband and I were lucky enough to travel for a month in New Zealand to see the film locations, and I was just wondering what your favourite film location was.
I love being in the South Island. So there was an area just outside of Queenstown called Paradise, which we filmed sort of Aemon Hen, the last bit of the Fellowship of the Ring, as the orcs sort of surround us, and then Sam and Frodo peel off. All of that was shot in a place called Paradise, aptly named, because it's really beautiful. So that's one of my favorites, just spending time in the South Island. Really loved filming there and spending time there. Hobbiton was pretty magical because it existed. It was a place that it was a farmer's land that they had planted and, grown gardens over the course of a year so that it would look like it had been there for hundreds of years. So the first time that we went to Hobbiton was in January of 2000, and I had my birthday, I turned 19 in Hobbiton. Oh, that was a long time ago. Anyway, so that was a particularly magical location because it felt real. There was no place you could look and see a set. You know, everything was actually there as if it had been there for hundreds of years, which was a pretty incredible thing to see. And you can still visit it now. They actually, when we filmed Lord of the Rings, when we were done with Hobbiton, they took all of the facades away, but they left the holes there, and the basic sort of architecture was there. And they gave tours, but the Hobbit houses were removed, so I can't imagine the tours were very exciting. It's like, it used to be pretty, but there's nothing there anymore. So when it came time to do the Hobbit, they rebuilt it all, but with an eye towards permanence and keeping it there, so that the tours from there on out could actually look and resemble what the films look like. And they actually, I think, expounded upon it and built an additional number of Hobbit holes as well, so it was a much larger piece of land. And then they built the Green Dragon as an actual place that you can go and have a pint. So you can actually go now. It's really beautiful.
Question over here.